husband screamed at me to stop embarrassing him while I lay collapsed on the kitchen floor of his sister's house, unable to move my legs, my vision splitting into two of everything. It was the night of our 5th wedding anniversary. October 12th. His sister had insisted on hosting a small dinner that turned out to be 23 people, half of whom I'd never met. I'd worn the navy dress my husband bought me last Christmas, the one he said made me look less tired. I'd done my makeup carefully, even though my hands had been shaking all afternoon for reasons I couldn't name. I remember standing in the bathroom, gripping the edge of the sink, trying to focus on my own reflection while the lights overhead seemed to pulse like something alive. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself a lot of things back then. His sister opened the door wearing white, which I noticed because anniversaries weren't her event. They were mine. But she'd somehow positioned herself as the host of every milestone in our marriage for the last 3 years. She kissed both my cheeks and said something about how pale I looked, said it loud enough for the room to hear, then pressed a glass of sparkling water into my hand before I could even set down my purse. "Drink that, sweetheart. You look like you might faint." My husband laughed behind me. "She's been doing that all week? The fainting thing? It's her new bit?" That was the first thing he said when we walked into our anniversary dinner. Not a toast, not a thank you to the people who came. He stood there holding a beer and announced to a room full of his coworkers and family that I was performing illness for attention. I remember the way the laughter rippled out from him, picked up by his sister, then by his cousin who works at the same firm, then by his mother who had flown in from Phoenix just to be there. I remember thinking I should laugh too, the way I'd been trained to laugh at his jokes for 5 years, but my mouth wouldn't move right. The left side of my face felt heavy, like someone had hooked a fishing weight through my cheek. I sat down at the dining room table next to my mother-in-law, who patted my hand and said, "Honey, every marriage hits a rough patch. You just need to stop making it about you." I hadn't said anything. I'd been there 4 minutes. The salad came out first, some kind of pear and goat cheese thing his sister had been bragging about on the family group chat for 2 weeks. I stabbed a piece of pear with my fork and missed the plate entirely. I tried again. Missed. The 3rd time I got it on the fork, but couldn't lift it to my mouth because my arm wasn't responding the way arms are supposed to respond. His mother saw me struggling and leaned over. "Are we doing this here? Really?" That was when I felt the first actual wave of fear. Not embarrassment, not the slow burn of being misunderstood. Real fear. The kind that lives in your stomach and tells you something is very, very wrong, and you might not have time to figure out what. I tried to stand up to go to the bathroom, and my legs wouldn't hold me. I went down hard, shoulder first, into the corner of the dining room table on the way to the floor. There was a sound, a gasp from somewhere, and then my husband's voice, sharp and cold and completely unsurprised. "Oh my God, get up right now. You are not doing this tonight." I wasn't doing anything. I was on the floor. My cheek was pressed against the hardwood, and I could see, from that angle, a single dust bunny under the china cabinet, and I remember thinking how strange it was that his sister kept her house so clean except for that one spot. And then I tried to say my husband's name, and it came out as a sound that wasn't a word. He crouched down, not to help me, to get closer to my ear so the room couldn't hear what he said next. "You ruin everything, every single thing. Get up before I drag you out of here." His sister was already on her phone. I thought for one stupid, hopeful second that she was calling 911. She was filming. She was filming. He was filming me. "Look at her," she said, narrating like a wildlife documentarian. 5 years of this. 5 years. His mother stood up and walked around the table and looked down at me the way you look at a wet rug. "She's done this before, you know. At my birthday. At Christmas. The girl loves a stage. I had never done this before. I had never collapsed in my life. I had been to the doctor 4 times in the last 6 months for what they kept calling stress, anxiety, perimenopause maybe, despite the fact that I was 31. I had blood work that came back fine. I had a brain scan that came back fine. I had been told, by my husband's mother specifically, that I should stop running to doctors. Every time you feel a little off, it's expensive and it's embarrassing. I lay on that floor for what felt like an hour, but was probably 6 minutes. Nobody helped me up. Nobody called for an ambulance. My husband eventually sat back down at the table and picked up his fork and continued eating his salad, while his cousin, the one from the firm, made a joke about how I should have stuck to white wine. People laughed. I heard them laugh. I will hear that laugh for the rest of my life. The only person who moved was a woman I didn't know. She'd come with my husband's coworker, his +1, a woman in a green dress who I'd seen once at a holiday party 2 years ago. She got up from her seat at the far end of the table and walked the length of the room and knelt down next to me and said very quietly, "Hey, honey, can you hear me?" I tried to nod. My head moved a little. "What's your name?" I told her. It came out slurred, but it came out. "How old are you?" I told her. 31. She put 2 fingers on my wrist. She put the back of her hand on my forehead. She lifted my eyelid with her thumb, very gently, and looked into my eye, and her face changed in a way I will also never forget. It went from concerned to something else, something quiet and clinical and afraid. She turned around and said to the room in a voice that didn't match her green dress at all, "I'm an ER nurse. I'm calling an ambulance. Nobody touch her. Nobody move her." My husband stood up. "She doesn't need an ambulance. She does this." "I told you she does this." The woman in the green dress stood up too, and she was shorter than him, but something about the way she squared her shoulders made him take a step back. "Sir, her left pupil isn't reacting to light. Her pulse is 138. She's stroking out or she's been poisoned. So sit down or I will have the paramedics treat you as a suspect when they get here." The room went silent. I want to tell you something about that silence. It was not the silence of people who were shocked. It was the silence of people who were calculating. I was on the floor and I could see the bottoms of their shoes from where I lay, and I watched my mother-in-law's feet shift just slightly toward the hallway, the way someone shifts when they're thinking about leaving. The ambulance came in 11 minutes. The nurse, whose name I learned later was a single beautiful syllable I'd never heard before as a name, stayed with me the entire time. She held my hand. She asked me questions about what I'd eaten that day, what I'd drunk, what medications I was taking, whether I took vitamins, whether anyone had given me anything new. I told her about the multivitamin pack my sister-in-law had been making for me for months. The little organized weekly pill cases she dropped off every Sunday. "Because you're always so tired, honey. You need to take care of yourself." The nurse's face did the clinical and afraid thing again. "Where are those vitamins now?" "My purse?" I whispered. "I have today's in my purse?" She found my purse. She took out the small plastic baggie with Saturday's vitamins in it. She put it inside a sandwich bag from her own purse, sealed it, and put it in her own coat pocket. She rode with me in the ambulance. My husband did not. The ER doctor at the hospital was a woman in her 50s, with reading glasses on a chain, and the kind of voice that made you feel like everything was going to be okay, even when nothing was okay. She ran talk screens. She ran them twice. She looked at me after the second set came back, and she pulled up a chair next to my bed, and she said, "Honey, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to be honest with me, because what's in your bloodstream right now should have killed a smaller woman." I don't remember what I said. I remember crying. I remember the nurse in the green dress who had stayed, holding my other hand and saying, "You're safe. You're safe. You're here now." The doctor said the word thallium. She said it twice. She said it slow. She said it slow. She said it was rare. She said it was old-fashioned, almost. She said it used to be in rat poison before they regulated it out of most products in this country. She said the levels in my blood and hair samples suggested months of exposure. Not a single dose. Months. Small amounts. Consistent. The kind of dosing, she said carefully, that someone would do if they wanted the symptoms to look like a mystery illness. The kind of dosing that would let a husband say, on the phone to his mother, "The doctors can't figure out what's wrong with her, she's just falling apart." I'd heard him say that on the phone, twice. To his mother. And once, I realized, lying in that hospital bed at 3 a.m., with a saline drip in my arm and my hair falling out onto the pillow in soft brown clumps, I'd heard him say it to his sister who packed my vitamins. The police came at 4:17 a.m. 2 detectives, a woman and a man, both of them with that careful, tired voice that police use when they already know the answer and just need you to say it out loud. They asked about the vitamins. The nurse had handed over the baggie. They asked about my husband. They asked about my sister-in-law. They asked about my finances. That was the question that made my stomach drop, because I'd taken out a life insurance policy 3 years ago, a big one, $750,000. My husband had insisted. He'd said it was responsible. He'd said his coworker, the one whose +1 was the nurse who saved my life, had recommended it. I'd signed the papers in our kitchen on a Tuesday night while he stood behind me with a glass of wine. I'd named him as the sole beneficiary. He'd said it was symbolic. He'd said it was love. I told the detectives all of this, and the female detective wrote it down and didn't look up at me when she said, "Ma'am, when did your husband stop working full-time?" I blinked. "He hasn't. He works at his firm. He's been there 8 years. She looked at her partner. Her partner looked at her. "Ma'am, your husband was let go from his firm in March. His sister has been wiring him money out of the joint estate she controls for your father-in-law's care. Your husband has not had income for 8 months. I had no idea. I'd no idea about any of it. I had been giving him my paycheck. I worked from home as a senior accountant for a regional firm, and I made good money, the kind of money that supported a household, and I'd been depositing it into our joint account every 2 weeks for 5 years and trusting him to handle the bills, because he said he liked to, because he said it made him feel like a husband." The detectives left around 6 in the morning. The nurse in the green dress finally went home. The doctor changed shifts. A new doctor came in and told me I was lucky. He said that word, lucky, like it was a gift somebody had handed me, and I wanted to laugh, except I couldn't, because the muscles in my face still weren't working right, and laughing felt like trying to lift a piano with my eyebrows. My mother flew in from Ohio that afternoon. I hadn't told her anything in 3 years. My husband had slowly cut off most of my friends and family, the way he'd slowly poisoned me, in increments small enough that I never once saw it as deliberate. She walked into that hospital room and took one look at me, my hair on the pillow, the IV, the bruise on my shoulder from the dining room table, and she sat down on the edge of the bed and she didn't say anything. She just held my hand. For about an hour. She just held my hand. I don't have words for what that was like. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be held by someone who didn't want anything from me. The lawyer came on day 3. I want to be clear about how she came to me, because this is the part of the story I think about the most, even now, 2 years later. She wasn't hired. She wasn't recommended. She walked into the hospital on her own. Her name was a soft Welsh-sounding name I'd never heard before. She was in her late 40s. Gray streak in her dark hair, wearing the kind of shoes that told you she'd come straight from court. She'd read about my case in a police bulletin that morning, she said. Domestic poisoning case, victim alive, suspects in custody. She'd specialized in cases like mine for 15 years. She came to the hospital the way some people come to church, not because she had to, but because she felt called. "I'm not soliciting you," she said, sitting down in the chair my mother had been using. "I want to be very clear about that. You can tell me to leave and I will leave. But before you make any decisions about your case, I want you to know what I know." She knew that my husband had taken out a second life insurance policy on me 18 months ago without my signature, that I had never seen, $300,000 more. She knew that my sister-in-law had a degree in pharmacology from 20 years ago and had worked at a chemical supply company before becoming a stay-at-home mom. She knew that my mother-in-law had been the executor of my father-in-law's estate for the last decade, and that the estate had been hemorrhaging money for the last 3 years, and that the family was approximately 14 months from total financial collapse. She knew that my paycheck, my single-woman paycheck, had been keeping the entire extended family afloat without my knowledge. She told me all of this in the tone of a woman who had seen the same play with different actors, many, many times. I asked her why she came. She said, "Because the part that nobody investigates after they catch the husband is what the family knew. And in your case, honey, the family knew everything." I hired her that afternoon. The next 4 months are a blur in my memory, and I think that's a kindness. I went home to my mother's house in Ohio because I couldn't go back to my own house. which was a crime scene, and then later because I couldn't go back to my own house, which I had decided to sell. I did physical therapy 3 times a week. I learned to walk again, and I mean that literally. I had to learn to put weight on my left leg, then my right, then both, because the thallium had damaged the nerves in a way that was supposedly reversible but felt, in those first weeks, like a life sentence. My hair grew back in patches. I lost 28 pounds. I cried in the shower every morning for about 6 weeks, and then one morning I didn't, and then most mornings I didn't. And then, one Sunday in February, I made pancakes for my mother, and we ate them at the kitchen table, and I laughed at something on the radio, and I realized I hadn't laughed in 7 months. Meanwhile, my lawyer worked. She worked the way someone works when they have been waiting their entire career for one specific case. She got the search warrants. Police found thallium acetate in a small bottle at the back of my sister-in-law's pantry, behind a row of cooking sherry. They found a notebook in her handwriting documenting my symptoms, my doses, my weight, my progress. She'd been keeping records like a chemist. They found texts between her and my mother-in-law going back 19 months, talking about timelines, talking about the policy, talking about how she's slower this week, almost ready. They found my husband's emails. He'd been the planner. He'd been the one who started it all 2 years ago, when he lost the firm account that put him on the path to being fired. He'd written to his sister in one of the emails my lawyer read out to me in her office, and he'd called me the meal ticket who doesn't know she's the meal. I remember reading that line and feeling something inside me go quiet and cold and final. I think that was the moment I stopped being afraid. I think that was the moment I became something else. The trial was 11 months after the dinner. I testified for 2 days. My lawyer walked me through it the way you walk a child through a dark room, slowly, with a lot of warnings about what's coming. The defense tried to suggest I was a hypochondriac who had been imagining symptoms for years and had probably poisoned myself for attention. They actually said that, in court, with a jury sitting there. The nurse in the green dress testified. She brought her notes from that night, her assessment of my pupils, my pulse, the smell on my breath that she'd recognized as something off. The ER doctor testified. The detective testified. My lawyer brought up the second insurance policy and the forged signature and the family's financial records and the notebook in my sister-in-law's pantry, and by the end of the second week, the jury was looking at my husband and his sister and his mother the way you get something you found dead under your porch. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty, all 3 of them. On every charge. My husband got 28 years. My sister-in-law got 25. My mother-in-law, who had been the financial mastermind, the one with the spreadsheets and the timelines, got 32. The judge said something during sentencing that I want to share with you because it's the closest thing I have to a moral for the story. He said, the most dangerous abusers are the ones who convince the victim that her body is the liar. I sat in that courtroom in a gray dress my mother had bought me, holding my mother's hand, and I cried. Not because I was sad, not because I was triumphant. I cried because somewhere inside me, a small part of me that had been holding a question for 2 solid years finally got to set the question down. I had not been crazy. I had not been dramatic. I had not been imagining things. I had been right. I had been right the whole time, and 3 people had spent 2 years trying to convince me otherwise, and now there was a man in a black robe saying it out loud, on a record in front of the world. The civil case came next. My lawyer handled that one too. We won the house, which I sold within a month because I never wanted to see it again. We won the joint accounts, which had less in them than I expected because my husband had been quietly draining them for 2 years. We won both insurance policies, which were voided by his conviction, the proceeds of which my husband's family had no claim to. We won damages from his sister, which were collected slowly from her assets. We won damages from my mother-in-law's estate, which was substantial despite her debts because of property she owned in Arizona that she'd hidden from her own husband for decades. When it was all done, 2.5 years after the dinner, I had enough money to never worry about money again, and I had no husband and no in-laws and no house, and a small apartment in a town my mother and I had picked together off a map because neither of us had ever been there, and we both liked the name. I want to tell you about the apartment. It has yellow walls in the kitchen because I painted them yellow myself on a Saturday with the windows open and music playing and nobody to tell me yellow was a stupid choice. It has a bedroom with a window that faces east because I wanted to wake up with the sun for the first time in my adult life. It has a small balcony where I grow tomatoes and basil and one stubborn lemon tree that probably won't survive the winter, but I keep trying. It has no television in the living room because I realized 6 months after I moved in that I had spent 5 years of my marriage watching television. I didn't choose because my husband always had the remote. I have not dated anyone. I am not in a hurry. My therapist says that's healthy. My mother says I'll know when I'm ready. The nurse in the green dress, who has become one of my closest friends, says I should take a year for every year I was married, which would put me on a dating app sometime in 2030, which honestly sounds about right. I do speak now. I do that part deliberately. I work with a small nonprofit that helps women in domestic poisoning cases, which is a more common crime than people realize. And I tell my story to women who are still in the early stages of figuring out that they're being killed slowly by someone who promised to love them. I tell them about the vitamins. I tell them about the laughter at the dinner table. I tell them about the woman in the green dress who saved my life because she'd been a nurse for 20 years and she knew what a pupil was supposed to do. Mostly, I tell them this. If your body keeps trying to tell you something and the people who claim to love you keep telling your body to shut up, listen to your body. Your body is the only one in the room who is not lying to you. There's a card I keep on my refrigerator. The nurse in the green dress sent it to me on the 1-year anniversary of the dinner. It's a blank card with a watercolor of a green pear on the front, and inside, in her handwriting, she wrote, "There's no Hallmark card for surviving the people who are supposed to love you." So I made one. Happy first year of being alive on purpose. I read that card most mornings. I read it on the days when I wonder how I missed it. I read it on the days when I miss being married, which still happens, which my therapist says is normal, which is a kind of grief I'm allowed to have. I read it on the days when I see a couple holding hands in the grocery store and I have to put my basket down and breathe. I read it on the days when I am simply, ordinarily, unremarkably happy. Because those days happen now, too. Those days are the ones that surprise me most. I don't know who's listening to this story tonight. I don't know if you're a woman whose husband told you this morning that you're being too dramatic about the migraines you've been getting for 6 months. I don't know if you're someone whose mother-in-law packs your vitamins. I don't know if you're someone who's been looking at a life insurance policy you don't remember signing, but if you are, if even one of those sentences made your stomach drop, please, please listen to your body. Please go to a doctor. Your husband doesn't know. Please take the bottle of vitamins to a lab. Please tell one person, just one, who is not in his family. I am alive because a stranger in a green dress walked across a dining room. I am alive because she was trained and she was paying attention and she did not laugh when everyone else laughed. You deserve someone who walks across the room for you. You really, really do. I think about that dining room floor more than I should. The dust bunny under the china cabinet. The sound of my husband's fork scraping against his plate while I lay there. The laughter. I think about it because for a long time I was angry at myself for not seeing what was coming, and somewhere along the way I had to make peace with the fact that I couldn't have seen it. None of us can see something we have been deliberately, patiently trained not to see. The thing nobody tells you about being slowly poisoned is that the poison is not the worst part. The worst part is the chorus of voices around you telling you that what you are feeling is not real. My husband did not just put thallium in my vitamins. He put a sentence in my head every day for 2 years, and the sentence was, "You are imagining things." His sister put it there. His mother put it there. By the time my body was screaming at me to run, I no longer trusted my body to know the difference between screaming and singing. That is the thing I want you to take from this. Your body is not stupid. Your body is the oldest, most honest part of you, and it has been keeping you alive since before you could speak. When the people in your life teach you to override it, they are not loving you. They are training you. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole story. I have thought a lot about why my mother-in-law did what she did. She wasn't a movie villain. She was a woman who had run out of money and run out of options and decided, somewhere in the quiet of her own kitchen, that her son's life was worth more than her daughter-in-law's. That decision didn't fall on her from the sky. It grew slowly, the way mold grows, in a marriage and a family that had stopped asking moral questions a long time before I came along. Cause and effect. They made 100 small choices to value money over a person, and at the end of those 100 choices was a notebook in a pantry with my name on it. I am not a religious woman, but I believe in this. Every small choice you make about who matters and who doesn't is a brick. You are building something with those bricks every single day, and one day you will live inside what you built. My in-laws built a house I almost died in. I am building something else now, a small one, with yellow walls. If you are listening to this and something in your chest is tightening, please don't argue with the tightening. Don't ask it to be polite. Don't ask it to wait until it's convenient. Get strong enough to walk out of the room. Get smart enough to ask one question your husband can't answer. Get honest enough to admit that love is not supposed to make you sick. I survived because a stranger walked across a room. You can be that stranger for yourself. You really, really can.